What if you learned that you were being investigated for a sexual assault in Florence, South Carolina? What would you do? Hi, I'm Greg McCollum. I'm a criminal defense attorney and founder of the Complete Legal Defense Team. Let me tell you a story, and I'll call him Robert. Robert contacted us, and his concern was the police wanted to talk to him, and he wanted to know what he could do or what he should do. As it turns out, Robert, who was a young professional, who had a real estate license, who was a very ambitious young man, had taken a job specifically with a certain real estate group because they were one of the more innovative real estate companies. They had a good training program, they had a good sales record, and he wanted to be with one of the best. And so he specifically moved to that area to work for that company and be trained by them and be trained by the person who owned the company. As it turns out, there was a young woman. She was of the age of consent, because there's certain ages you have to be at to consent to have sex with someone. And she had gone and told her mother that this thing had happened in the real estate office, that Robert had sexually assaulted her, and that they called the police. The police started investigating. So once they reach out to Robert to talk to him, to have him come into the police station and talk and do those things, he was smart enough to contact us. Interestingly, when we were talking to him in that situation, because it's a sexual assault charge, I think at the time we only charged $5,000 to handle the pre-arrest part. And what we do in that situation is we talk to the police. We don't let Robert incriminate himself. We find out if an arrest is imminent. In other words, that's one of the things we ask the detective is, do you have a warrant? The other thing we ask them is, if you want to talk to Robert, is that going to change anything? If Robert sits down, usually in our office with a detective, and waives his rights and answers questions, is that going to move the needle? Is that going to change anything? Now, many times the detectives tell us, and these are kind of the buzzwords, well, I've got enough to get a warrant right now, but I'd like to get a statement from him. That usually means that that person is going to be arrested, so there's nothing to be gained from giving a statement. Now, in Robert's situation, they weren't ready to arrest him right then, and I think that was because the allegations were not really sound. I think maybe the detective had some question in the back of his mind and wasn't ready to just run out and get a warrant. Now, for whatever reason, Robert thought that that was a lot of money. And while I can sort of understand that in the state of mind that somebody's in, because if you're sitting there minding your own business or you're at work and the police contact you and say, we want to talk to you about something, you're thinking, well, I didn't do anything, so I'm sure, I guess, but then you need to get some legal advice. But we see it differently because we've seen this so many times. And most people who are being investigated for sexual assault, at least in our jurisdictions, they're going to be arrested, almost all of them. And so what happens when you hire us is that we get in between you and the police. We get in between Robert and the police. We also are saying that if he's going to be arrested, let us know, and you won't have to go track him down. We'll bring him to the jail. He will come under his own power. He will sit there. He'll be ready to go into jail, which there's a protocol for that, because you can't take your computer and your phone and all this stuff. You can't have a pocket knife in your pocket. You don't even need keys or anything. You want to go in there with next to nothing, maybe a driver's license and no wallet. And then the process is smooth. You're going to spend the night in jail, and then we'll be there at your bond hearing the next day, tell the judge, one, you surrendered, you have a lawyer, You're not a flight risk, and we can explain all that to control the conditions of bond. Because in that situation, if the judge doesn't hear from us or hear from a lawyer saying these things, bonds typically are higher. If somebody's charged with sexual assault, the judge doesn't know anything about the allegations, but you're charged with rape. So what are they going to do? They're going to set a high bond. They may put you under house arrest. They put you on what's called a GPS monitor, which you pay for, so they can monitor you where you go, and you have to check in and do these things. So if we're there in that situation, a lot of that is avoided because of the things we're able to explain to the judge in a bond hearing, which literally takes about 5 minutes because they're having bond hearings, for 30 people. So in this situation, thankfully, Robert came around. Now, Robert, was a young professional. He had a lot to lose. He had a lot riding on it. And so if he gets arrested and charged with a sexual assault, just from experience, most reputable companies, if not all, I would say all, are going to fire you. They're not going to let a rapist work for the company. And in the situation for a real estate agent who goes and meets people at properties and shows properties and is alone with people, there's no real estate company is going to let somebody who's charged with sexual assault do that work. Another thing that's going to happen is once Robert is charged, then somebody's going to file a complaint with the real estate commission, and they're going to do an investigation and likely temporarily suspend his license. So this happens all the time with sexual assault cases. It doesn't matter if there even was a sexual assault. It doesn't matter if you're guilty. It doesn't matter if they're false allegations. Once you're charged, everyone thinks the worst. You turn into this, public enemy, this kind of pariah that nobody wants to be around. So all of that's riding on it. So from our perspective, the fee that we charge there is worth its weight in gold. So eventually, within a day or two, Robert comes around, he hires us. So we talk to him. We're also talking to the police, trying to hold them at bay, because the longer we can keep the police from getting a warrant, the more time goes by, there's a better chance that they won't do something, okay? Now, in this situation, apparently what had happened is Robert was a young, energetic, upwardly mobile, going to be a very successful person, and this intern, this woman, and I can't remember how old she was, within his age range of 3 or 4 years probably, but apparently, she just became overwhelmed in the office and started perform like a sex act on him, which I think startled him. Okay, and in that situation, you're kind of damned either way for him, because if you rebuff that and push them away, you could be accused of something because the person's been scorned and angry. If you do something with somebody that you're really not in a relationship with, that doesn't have good consequences. So the best thing I could tell you is don't get in that situation. Don't meet with somebody with the door closed. So once we started talking to the company, and we had a conversation with the company's lawyer, and we started looking at the office, several things just didn't add up. One, the office was full of people that day. It was the middle of the day, and this office that they were in was a middle office. It had, it wasn't some heavy-duty door. Those doors to that room, I don't even think lock, and people are walking back and forth. Plus, the walls are thin, and so if you could hear something, if there was something odd happening. Certainly, if somebody was being assaulted or anybody was arguing, everyone would hear it. So we were able to talk to the detective, and we said, "Hey, look, can we get you, to go look at the office? Can we get you to go look at where she claims this happened?" And then as we talked to people that work for the company, as our legal team talked to people that work for the company, we found out who was there during that exact time period. And there were 2 or 3 or 4 people who were witnesses. Now, for the police, they think a witness is somebody who saw you commit a crime, either saw you or heard you commit a crime. But for defense attorneys like us, witnesses are also people who are in proximity and would have heard you commit a crime and didn't hear anything unusual, so everything is normal. So we got the police to actually do an investigation and talk to some of those people, and so it started creating a completely different picture. It wasn't a situation where it was like she said. It was a situation where independent witnesses said, we know Robert has high standards. Robert's a professional. We were all in the office. It wouldn't be unusual for one of us just to walk in that door, okay? It wouldn't be unusual for us to hear somebody talking in there if they were talking loudly. And there was nothing unusual that happened that day. So essentially what happened is that because we were able to get the detective to actually interview these witnesses, to go look at the scene, we're telling him also about all the good things about Robert. Robert's young, he's energetic, he's professional. This is what other people say about him. He has no criminal history. He's never been charged with a crime, much less an assault. He's clean as a whistle. And so as we go through this, eventually what happens is the police made a decision to not get a warrant. Now, sometimes they do that in kind of a backhanded way where they go to the judge and they present to the judge as whether or not they have probable cause to get a warrant, which is scary for us because probable cause to get a warrant is a low standard. It doesn't mean you're guilty. It just means that there's enough there, doesn't require much. But in that situation, if the detective goes in and has an honest private conversation with the judge and says, I don't feel good about this case, so I need to know, if you would issue a warrant or something. The judge cues off of that. The judge sees what's going on, and the judge declines the warrant. In that situation, then the police officer can go back to the alleged victim, go back to the alleged victim's mother. In this situation, I think the mother and maybe another family member were really pushing this. If I remember correctly, I think perhaps they'd even put stuff on social media, calling Robert a rapist and this sort of thing. And then we see that now, and then that puts pressure on the police. So thankfully, the detective did a good investigation. No warrant was issued, and so that was the end of it. So instead of Robert hiring us and paying us, $30,000 to $50,000 to $80,000 to defend him on a sexual assault case, which would have been pending for probably 2 years in our jurisdiction, could be longer, all right? And in that period of time, he would have probably lost his real estate license, not had a job, and be trying to fend for himself and pay us, which is the situation that people get in. So this was one that turned out well. It worked out well. I'm sure if you would have had an opportunity to talk to Robert, he would say in hindsight, that was the best money he'd ever spent. If you're being investigated for something, if you're being investigated for a sexual assault, it's very important. Contact us, talk to us, hire us to do the preliminary part, which costs 10 times less than the legal fees if you're arrested and charged. It could change everything. It could be the difference between somebody making $50,000 to $150,000 a year. You could literally lose $300,000 in income while your case is pending, and then you're going into a bad situation. At that point, everyone thinks you're guilty. You're circling the drain, and your life's coming apart until we're able to resolve your case. So if you need help, contact us at the Complete Legal Defense Team. You can find us at CompleteLegalDefenseTeam.com. Call us. We have intake people. We have paralegals. They will talk to you, find out what you need, get back with you and talk to you some more and explain to you what we can do. So don't be shy about contacting us if you're being arrested or if you're being investigated for a sexual assault. The complete legal defense team, and we defend the accused who have a lot to lose. So if you have a lot to lose, especially if you've never been arrested before, contact us at the complete legal defense team.